So, hello and welcome to the third instalment of the Football Unravelled podcast. It's a bit of a special one today. We have our first pro on the pod, if we can call it that, as a new series. I think we're going to have to think of a good name for that. But I'm joined by co-host Brandon Faulkner. Brandon, how you doing, mate?
I'm good. How are you? I'm very excited for our guest today.
Very excited. And to introduce you to our guest, it is a current Melbourne Victory player, Mr. Giancarlo Gallifuoco. Gigi, first of all, how was that pronunciation?
Oh yeah, I loved how much sauce you just added to my name. That's fantastic.
Mate, honestly, I've been practicing the last 3 weeks for it, so
Yeah,
I hope I did it justice.
Special.
Gigi,
unreal, mate. You smashed it.
First of all, mate, how are you getting on over there with old Corona?
Yeah, man, good. Thank you. I was just gonna ask you the same thing because I feel like the benefit of Australia being so far from everything is we don't cop everything as bad. So yeah, it's been all right here, man. How's it all over there? Pandemonium?
Yeah, it's still what's
carnage. Yeah,
well,
major incident of people going to the beach. It's
Yeah,
just everything.
that.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah, so we still have quite a lot of restrictions. You're not even allowed to meet anyone inside your house. I think it's maximum 6 people outside.
Yeah.
So
we have the extreme lack of judgment on a lot of people's part. So that definitely doesn't help.
Yeah, so it's been better, mate, but we'll all get there. And at the end of the day, as long as everyone's safe, people have died from it. So, you can't really complain about not going out to see your mates. But yeah, I've heard 16th of July is the restart for you. You must be excited for that.
We're buzzing, man. We're the first game as well, us against Western United. And I'm buzzing, man. This 3 months without football has been horrendous. So it's been good watching the Premier League come back and the Bundesliga and Serie A. Now I'm just excited for us to start playing.
Yeah, it's quite interesting actually because I follow sort of Aussie sport a bit, and it's the last thing to come back, isn't it? Football, because you've got AFL restarted, rugby league as well.
Yeah, we kind of were stitched up a little bit because we happened to be right at the end of our broadcasting deal.
Yeah.
So then we got into a really extended negotiations because obviously we had the league wanting to continue and the broadcaster kind of knowing that, well, right now you're in a bit of a desperate place. So then began like a very, very annoying negotiation for all of us. But fortunately enough, it's all been done. And so now we can start training and getting ready for this game.
And I guess that's quite important, the TV deal, because I guess like a lot of other leagues, clubs need that TV deal, don't they?
Yeah, exactly, and that dictates the amount of money the club can spend, and then the expansion, its fan base, and for us, I think. I hope that we can tap more into the Asian market. I think there's half the world's population there, and they all love football. And I'm hoping that this new broadcasting deal that we have for the next 18 months with Fox Sports can kind of push more in that direction. But see what happens.
Yeah, lovely. I think we'll tap on that a bit later on as well. So just to start with, I think it's probably best to start right at the beginning of your career. So obviously, you grew up in Sydney. How was that for football? Because I guess Sydney probably more associated towards rugby league. I don't know if you'd agree with that, and definitely cricket.
Yeah,
as well.
definitely. I even went to a rugby high school, so it was like it's strange. It was strange in the sense that outside of my home, achievements and accolades that my home deemed so important because my family's from Italy, and so for us football was life, and in the household it was football all the time, and waking up at 4 a.m. and watching Napoli play, and and all that kind of stuff, and then you'd go to school, and it was like you were just the normal guy again. All those achievements didn't really count for anything because we wanted to talk about a different sport. So growing up in Sydney, not that it was I had like an unbelievable childhood, so I'm not trying to complain in any way, but I started developing like a kind of Superman Clark Kent thing going on, where I would go to school and I was just kind of Gigi, normal kid who's got average grades, and then I would step onto the field and I'd have my family in this like support group, and then all of a sudden I was Superman, and that's where I felt I could do everything, and I'm very, very grateful that I had like a real passionate dad and mom and family, and I think that kind of drove most of my motivation through football. I don't think I would have pushed as far if I didn't have that kind of family.
Yeah, and I
Do you
think
think that with the
yeah, go on,
I
Brandon.
think like with the sort of, as you said, like the Clark Kent Superman type thing, do you think that there was almost like less pressure on you than if you were like a school rugby star and everyone knew who you were? Or do you think it sort of released you to like go and be the best player you could be when you stepped on the football pitch?
Yeah, definitely. I when I was younger, I used to think it added pressure because it was when I was at home. But now in hindsight, I think for sure, like when I had a bad game on the weekend, I'd go to school and nobody knew about it. Nobody cared about it. So I was kind of lucky like that. And so then I would just kind of be able to switch off, and then Monday training at night time, and then boom, it started again. I was chasing this high on the weekend. But then when I would score and win and get selected for some team or something, I would like stroll into school feeling like I'm top boy, and they'd be like, "We don't care. Go do your English homework." And I'm like, "Oh yeah, sorry," and just right back down to normal.
And yeah, I think obviously people will be able to pick up on the Italian heritage with your name.
Yeah.
It's just it's quite interesting. I'm sort of wondering if obviously you didn't have that Italian heritage. So obviously, football is just it's life or death for Italians, isn't it? And I'm just wondering if you maybe didn't have that Italian heritage, would the system during your childhood have pushed you away from football, maybe?
I think 100% it would have. Especially because of my build. Like, I was always pretty tall, pretty
Yeah.
fast. So any coach would have gone, pick up the oval ball, not kick the spherical ball, and run into that other person as fast as you can, and not trying to diss that sport in any way.
Yeah.
But if it wasn't, I think you're 100% right. If it wasn't for my family's heritage, I don't think I would have played football.
Is there any stage that you thought that maybe having a go at one of the other sports, or is it always just tunnel vision, football's everything?
Listen, I didn't really, and I'm not trying to make my dad sound like a tyrant, but I didn't really have an option. It was always football. Like, my dad used to say there was like a rule, and my mum used to hate it. That like no matter the weather, like if it was raining, you couldn't go outside. If it was too windy, if it was too cold, you couldn't go outside. You had to play in the house, unless you were going outside to play football. Then you could crack all rules. So me, my brother, and my cousins, we knew that football was the golden ticket to always having fun. And that was like, there was no better manipulation than that for me.
Yeah, so I think I just wanted to sort of touch on the youth development in Australia. Obviously, you said about your high school being more towards rugby. So I'm just sort of wondering, when you first started playing football and going through high school, what was the sort of like the external clubs you was at? Is it sort of similar to England in the respects that you would join a league team's academy, or is it more sort of soccer schools and stuff like that? How did you how's the development in Australia, and how did you obviously go through that process?
So if I had to compare it to something, it's like A-League started right when I became like 14, 15, and there wasn't really a youth system till a couple of years after that, and I had already left. But before that point, you kind of have like teams in each city, and I'm not saying this in a disrespectful way, but like of the same caliber and maybe pay of like Conference South, Conference North kind of level. So, you're going through the ages, under 10s, under 11s, under 12s, then it jumps up to 14s, 16s, 18s, and then first grade. But there is not, like, as much as that is a path, it's not a path that you think that's going to be my full-time job. that didn't really come until after I had basically left. The pinnacle that they had set up in the system was that every year 11 scholarships would be given to the best 15 or 16-year-olds, and they would go to Canberra in like a incredible facility where all the like Olympians would train. But even then, there was no real plan after that.
Yeah.
You're just really well trained in the best facilities in the country, and you're basically assured to play for the under-17s Australian national team, which is awesome, but you don't really have a club. So I was coming through at a point where Australia was trying to sort of develop that pathway.
It seems a lot sort of quite similar to the US system as well, I guess, where you'd have sort of national institutions where you would go and play as well. Do you think, obviously, you've done all right for yourself with your development? I know you left Australia quite young, but do you think that maybe the way forward is to have the A-League clubs have their youth academy? I know there's sort of more of a movement towards that now. Do you firmly believe that that's the best way to go, as sort of a pathway to the first team through the A-League clubs?
Well, first of all, thank you. And secondly, if I could describe my like ideal situation for, let's just say, like my children and stuff in Australia for football, I would hope that the A-League got to the point that maybe there was like 15, 16 teams around the country, and then they all had their like age groups down to the bottom, and then that there was a second division with another 15, 16 teams.
Yeah.
And the age groups down to the bottom. I think that would allow because in Australia, football is the most participated sport at grassroots level, at youth level. But then it's not the most viewed sport at the elite level. And I think that's because we don't have that connection like you do in England, where I think in England, the saying that I love is like, Salford City can come from like Div 7 and then get to Div 4, and then this team can come from Div 1 and go down to Div 6, and it can shift up from Premier League to Conference and all the other divisions in between. And I would love for Australia to have that type of football, to have a first division and a second division, and players that are 8 years old, 10 years old, they go to watch the games on the weekend. I think that's what I want to be when I'm older. That's what I want to build through the ranks, and that's what I want to get to.
Yeah,
So
I think as well, with the no promotion and relegation system, I just feel, say, if you get 3/4 of the way through the season, you're sitting 10th, there's not a chance that you can win the league. Or I think actually you have the playoff system, don't you, to actually be able to win the league? Is that top 4 or just the top 4 qualifier? Top 6. Okay, so they do try and make it so that you've always got something to play for, but I guess that when you get to the back end of the season, there's quite a few sort of dead rubber games, especially if you're lingering towards the bottom of the table, and you just think, well, the next 6 games will do enough. But whereas if there was that relegation, there'd be that incentive you've got to win every game. So I guess
exactly.
I mean, do you ever see that happening, or because of obviously the franchises and stuff like that?
Yeah, just because I've been there, I always try to help like younger players when they're coming through, and that transition is like a real hard time. And I was speaking to a centre back literally 2 days ago about he kept making this mistake, and he's a young boy and he'll learn from it, but he kept making this mistake where he was getting the ball from the goalkeeper and they were setting a trap on him, and he wouldn't want to clear it. He would want to pass his way through it, and he'd lose the ball, and we were conceding. And I was having a walk with him back to the change room, and I said, it isn't your fault, this habit that you have, but it's a habit you've developed because you've been here the whole time.
Yeah.
Because if you had been in England, or you had been in Italy or Spain or anywhere else where there's relegation and promotion, and it's do or die, I promise you, you would smack that ball into the high heavens and shut the game off. And that's because you don't fear the game like they do. And I know that's a weird choice of words, but football over there is life or death.
Yeah.
And they will do anything. And I just don't think yet, and I hope for Australia that it comes into the game, But I don't think that they have that here yet.
Yeah, and I think from what you said there, the great Arrigo Sacchi said, football is the most important of the unimportant things. And I think that's obviously live and die by that quote. But yeah, I think it's probably a good time to talk about your move to England, going to Spurs. I saw you did another podcast, and it sort of came from a certain game I was playing for Australia under 19s, was it?
Under 17.
Under
So
17s.
yeah, man, like football is crazy. I went away to a competition to qualify for the under 17s World Cup, and at the time I was like basically the bench holding midfielder, centre back. My parents say, hey, they want to come. They want to come to this competition. It's in Uzbekistan. Now, I'm not trying to disrespect, but it's not in the top 10 most visited places, you know? It's not where you want to have your honeymoon. Anyway, so I begged them. I say, please don't come. I'm not going to play. Please don't come. Me and my dad get into this little argument. He says, no, we're coming, even if I just come to see you in the hotel. And that's the kind of father that he is, and I'm grateful for that. So we play the first 2 games and we win both, and we qualify. We like get out of the group. So the third game of the group stage, the coach just kind of throws me on in the last 10 minutes and just puts me on as number 10. Never played that position in my life, right? And I haven't played any of the games building up to the competition or the first 2. And I just think, you know what? Stuff it. I'm just going to go mental. So I get on this game, and in the span of 10 minutes, I tried 3 scissor kicks. 2 of them, I missed the ball, right? I shoot every time I get on the ball. I'm doing every skill I would never do, right? Anyway, I finished that 10 minutes. I'm pretty happy, pretty chuffed with myself. We draw 0-0 with Japan, and we go through to a quarterfinal. And I go for dinner with my parents outside the hotel, and I'm so ecstatic. I'm like, listen, if that's all that I play, I'm so happy. That's all I need. We get to the quarterfinal, and now it's whoever wins the quarterfinal, there's 4 teams in the semifinals, they qualify. So now it's do or die. We're versing UAE, and in 30 minutes, we're 2-0 down. I'm on the bench, and at the 45th minute, they go in. My coach is freaking out, and he comes out, the assistant coach, and he gives me the sorry. What the heck just happened?
Yeah.
Can you see me? Yeah.
Back.
Wow, sorry. And he hands me the set pieces, and he says, you're coming on striker. Once again, never played that position in my life. Have barely scored a goal for the national team. So I'm like, okay. Cut a long story short, that next 45 minutes, we score 3 goals. I score 2 of them. My face goes everywhere. And then I get a trial in Italy. I go to Italy, play with Torino in Serie B in a friendly game with the first team. From that, I get an article in the national paper. And then I have a Facebook message from somebody at Spurs saying, hey, the technical director, Tim Sherwood, wants your number. He said he wants to sign you. And then my whole life flipped on its head.
Wow. I mean, yeah, football's a funny game, isn't it? I mean, you must have been. I mean, was there even a decision there to join Spurs? Did you even have to make the decision?
No, that it was like,
Yeah.
First I just thought this is like a catfish or fake account or something. Like, there's no way this is actually real. And then before you knew it, I'm signed. I wish I could find it, but there's a video of me after I've signed, walking in a circle outside the training ground, going, "Oh my god, I can't believe that just happened! I can't believe that just happened! I can't believe it." Because 2 weeks before, I was basically broke, and I wasn't playing, and then all of a sudden, I've just signed a 3-year deal for Tottenham Hotspur, and I shook Harry Redknapp's hand. But that's football for you.
What was it like coming in from Australia into then Tottenham Hotspur's dressing room with all those like big names, and obviously Harry Redknapp being the manager?
So crazy, man. So crazy. Like, I think I became like the most shy 17-year-old ever. I think that first 6 months, I said a grand total of 2 words. But eventually, I think it was the best thing for me because it's sink or swim. You have to learn to deal with that kind of pressure and that kind of training levels. And then I was fortunate enough that I had the other 2 years to kind of build and learn, and the coaches kept changing, but that kind of helped me as well adapt to other coaches, other styles. And yeah, man, I love that 3 years there.
So you obviously you moved to England, and then you sort of alluded to it. They sort of teach you how to win in England. When you was at Spurs, would you say that's the biggest thing that you learned?
Yeah, I think especially Tim Sherwood, Les Ferdinand, and Harry Redknapp. I think they're real, and I say this as a compliment, but they're real English in that way. It's like do what has to be done, and I had never had that before, but I loved it. After Harry Redknapp, there was Villas Boas, and then all of a sudden you're focusing on other things. But I love that part of Spurs where, if somebody cops a bad tackle, Tim Shaw would look at me and kind of tell me to get him, and then I'd hunt that guy down and get him. And I kind of love that culture. We felt like a real strong team. And, in that reserve team, we had like Harry Kane, Tom Carroll, Ryan Mason, Maslawongo, me, Grant Ward, Grant Hall. Man, it was like a really Andros Townsend. Like it was such a good Nabil Bentaleb, and we just wanted to do anything for each other, and we were just battering people every week, and it was a good experience.
Yeah, so even back then, would you be able to, like, obviously about Harry Kane and Andros Townsend, once you've made it in the Premier League and stuff, would you have thought that they could have reached the heights that they have even back then?
To be honest, like you're in a change room where you all sort of believe you can. I think because it's so competitive and there's such big characters, you all kind of just tell yourself over and over and over again, I'm going to make it. I'm going to make it. Like, I'm good enough. I'm going to make it. I'm going to make it. And I think you kind of believe everyone is. And I think it's actually later once, like, you start getting 21, 22 and seeing all the business side of football, you realize, unfortunately for that person, he had this injury or this agent did this, and they all play those factors. But at the time, I was looking at this team thinking every single one of these players is unbelievable.
I think as well, obviously, I've never been good enough. I had a serial lack of talent. But even through like, sort of grassroots, I don't know if it was the same for you in the dressing room where your teammates, but you think if you've got a guy that plays the same position as you, you think, yeah, okay, I'm his teammate, but I've got to make sure that what I do is better than what he does. And even for me at grassroots, I'd always want to be better than my other opposite number, if that makes sense. So I guess there's sort of, I don't know what the word is, but obviously, is there a sense that you've always got to try and prove yourself when you're effectively playing for your career at a club like Spurs?
Yeah, and I think I'm sure you're talking yourself down. I'm sure you're a killer, but yeah, you just always have that attitude, and it was crazy, man. Like you're in a like you're full of alphas and big personalities, and you're just always competing. But then once we got to the game, like I said to you, we would all fight for each other, and it was good like that. But you realize that you're the Rezzies, you've got a big first team, and if I'm going to go up and now in this 11v11, I have to mark Adebayor, and he can smell for one little second that I'm nervous, he's going to destroy me. So I have to just put on this S on my chest and say, like, nah, I'm going to get him in the first tackle. I hit him and he thinks, all right, this little is here to train properly. And And that's just kind of the character that you put on, you know?
Yeah, definitely. And so obviously you said that you had different managers at Spurs. Obviously with manager to manager whilst you're in the reserves, I guess sort of the communication from the first team manager to the reserves team, I guess it sort of differs between different managers. So which one would you say from the first team managers maybe spoke to you the most, the reserve team players the most? Because I guess in some clubs that there's some that wouldn't bother with the reserves and they'd leave it just to the reserve staff.
Yeah. For me, the one coach that, for me personally, I kind of just wish I had a longer time under, because for me personally, I think he seemed to have had more of a plan for me. Was Villas-Boas. He also spoke fluent Italian, and he was like always. He kind of had a soft spot for me. But it was what it was, and unfortunately that got cut short. So, but for me, he spent a lot more time with the youngins. Him and probably when Tim Sherwood became the first team coach, then he pushed Andros Townsend, he pushed Ryan Mason, he pushed Harry Kane, which he lets people know all the time, but fair enough. So yeah, I would say a bit of a tie between both of them.
And so obviously you leave Spurs and you go to Swansea. Is that right?
Yeah. So I'm pretty much trying to put the phone on charge so that we don't die in the middle of this video. There we go. Just watch me upside down for a second. Yeah. So I went to Swansea, and not that I have many regrets, and I'm not trying to say that I regretted it at all, but I think I got blinded by moving to a good club rather than moving to the best club for me specifically. Where I was speaking to like a couple League One clubs at the time, and I think if I had chosen that route, I would have played a little bit more. Whereas Swansea at the time kind of came in last minute, said, "Yeah, we need you to be cover for the first team. Like you're playing cup games." And I thought, well, Swansea, it's a Premier League. Like, yeah, of course I'm going to choose that. And I chose that. And then I think from the second week, I could have told that I would have known that already. They were pushing me to the 21s, and they were saying, no, just focus on that and focus on winning the 21s. And then, no, next week. And, no. And then, so in hindsight, I kind of wish that I hadn't taken that route. But I went there, I learned, I was able again to train with very, very talented footballers. So I'm grateful for that.
Who's the manager at the time?
Yeah.
Was it Gary Monk?
Gary Monk.
Again, like a Premier League defender, so I'm guessing that it wasn't all bad in the respects that you could have learned a lot off of him.
Yeah, and he was another kind of defender that I loved learning that side of the game, in the sense of doing what you have to do to win and doing what you have to do to keep a clean sheet. Yeah, overall, I just, only because now it's so easy when you're looking back to say, oh, okay, I could skip that little hiccup or whatever. But yeah, in hindsight, it kind of added pressure onto the next year for me to try to rack up games. And I'm not sure I'm about to jump one question, but then that forced my hand into thinking coming back to Australia was a better option. And then I had gone now 17, 20, 21, and then 22, I'd gone back to Melbourne, or 21 roughly. And I had only racked up like 9 professional games, 10 professional games. So all of a sudden, before and not trying to say it in any arrogant way, but I felt like, I've made a really good jump here and I'm training with the best of them and feeling like, my market value was high, and it was just, I could see it was dwindling because I wasn't playing. And then all of a sudden I had not played at Spurs. I had not played at Swansea. I went to Melbourne, didn't really click with the coach. I wasn't playing. I would feature and then not play, and then feature and not play, and then start and then not play. and I ended that Melbourne year, and now I've done these 3 fantastic clubs, and I'm talking to people and they're saying, yeah, but you're 22 and you've played 7 games. What? There has to be something wrong with you, or I don't know what it is that you do. But I'm saying, no, but I was, like I was at this club and I trained with this guy and I was there. And so that particular part was, as much as I feel like it's built the whole foundation for my career and my game to learn, it was kind of had a bit of a negative effect when it came to my market value.
I think as
Was
well.
there ever like a stage when you were like, obviously, at that stage you would have known that you only had a handful of professional games? Was there ever like an option to go out on loan, or they want you just sort of like hunker down and try and focus on sort of development at the club?
So at Spurs and Swansea there was, but then towards the end of Swansea, as Melbourne was kind of lining itself up and I was playing with the national team, I don't think I had a full grasp of what it was doing to my value until I had gone to Melbourne. And then when I went to Melbourne, until I think they just agreed it now, but in Australia, you can't go on loan. You can't go on loan to another club. So I had the exact same thought when I came to Melbourne, and it was like my 3rd or 4th game, and I thought, okay, I think the writing's on the wall. I don't think this guy likes me. That's fine. I'm going to go on loan to one of the lower clubs. Melbourne Victory, at the time we were 1st or 2nd. It's like, I'll go on loan to one of the teams that are struggling. And my agent was like, no, they don't do that there. And I was like, whoa, so what am I supposed to do? And he said, well, you just have to keep trying to prove your point to the coach and trying to play. And like, I couldn't have annoyed that guy more. And I'm sorry for him, but I did it in all the right ways. But unfortunately, that kind of I had to just wait for my contract to end. And then there was like a little kind of like, do I want to extend or not extend at the end? And I just walked into the office and I said, listen, this is not working. I need to play games. I need to go. And then back on the plane to England.
So did you have a 1-year contract when you went back to Victory from England?
So I had a 1 year with a possible extension at the end. But the extension had to be agreed by both parties.
Because am I right in saying as well, A-League clubs can't buy players from other clubs either, can they? It has to be out of contract. So you got to thank your lucky stars really that you didn't commit to longer, because it could have, you could have been screwed by the system, so to speak.
Yeah, exactly. And I would have been then like 23 or 24, had 5-6 games, and I would honestly, and football's cruel like that, I probably would have been out of the game, regardless of what I had done. Excuse me, it would have been so hard for me to have 4 or 5 years in a row with barely any games and then try to get a team at, no matter what the level.
So you finished your time with Victory. You didn't want to extend your contract further. So now you go back to England. So first of all, before you did go back to England, obviously you accepted an offer from Torquay. Did you have other offers from maybe not just England, but other clubs as well, maybe back in Australia?
So I had one offer from a club lower, in the A-League, but just lower down the ladder. And I had an offer from a country, from a club in Asia, not from one of the top 3 like strong divisions. And it was more of a like monetary move, but I would be you know what I mean? It's to set myself as a specific level, and I couldn't really jump from there. And I remember me and my partner kind of having a dinner and saying like, listen, we got to sit down and make a real decision here. Like, are we going to try to chase the career, or are we going to try and chase the money? What's the decision we're going to make? And at the time I was a bit down. Like, I think I was a bit broken by the fact that I think I wanted to come home and be like a hero in Australia, and it just didn't pan out that way with my first stint in Melbourne. And I'm fortunate that my partner's quite headstrong, and she was like, listen, we only have a specific amount of time that you can play football. Let's give it the biggest crack that we can. We've sacrificed so much already. like, let's go for glory rather than go for money. And then if it doesn't work, then maybe we'll try to take that turn right at the end.
Yeah.
And so I called my old agent in England and said, what can you get me? And he was saying, listen, my friend, like, we can't pull the strings we used to pull because you haven't played there. And I was like, I don't care. I'll take the pay cut. I'll take anything. I just need to play games. And he was saying, oh, this team will have you on trial and this team will have you on trial. And I'm sure any footballer knows what that's like, but trials and auditions are horrendous, and they're they put you on the back foot, and they're really, really hard to impress. And I was saying, listen, I just want to go somewhere, and like somewhere that's going to offer me a contract and just get my foot in the door and play. I don't want to, as soon as you're trialing, you're pretty far down the pecking order already. And he said, listen, have you ever thought about going to play in the conference? And I was like, no, I haven't. Of course I haven't.
Yeah.
Last time I was there, I was in one of the biggest clubs in Europe. And he was saying, listen, I think if you're willing to take a pay cut, I can get you to this team. It's called Torquay, and you're going to play Saturday, Tuesday. By the end of this year, you're going to have 50 games, and no one's going to question the fact that you're inexperienced. And he said, like, would you be willing to do it? I looked at my partner, said, listen, it's going to be a couple, eggs for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and making that budget stretch. And she was like, "Yep, let's do it. Who cares? Let's give it a crack." And found myself in Torquay. I remember going to the first game and not once again, not trying to mug anything off, but like you just come from like White Hart Lane, Liberty Stadium, Amy Park. And then I'm in Torquay, and there's like, Playmore Stadium, and there's, like 1,200 people. And I thought, you know what, in the end, this is an opportunity for me to change the number on my CV. And I'm really grateful, man, because I went there and I was able to play a lot. And it gave me a newfound appreciation for the conference. And I saw that it was definitely not what I had thought it was when I was sitting on a pedestal at Spurs, that these people, even if they were 1,200 in the stadium, they sometimes made it feel like it was 35,000. And I loved it. And not saying this just because you're on the line, but then it got us a move to Dover. And at Dover, I had, and if my partner was on this podcast, she'd say the same, probably one of the best years of my life.
I think it's fair to say if you walk back into Dover, I don't think you'd have to pay for a drink anywhere, because as a Dover fan, I think we can all agree that you was key for us that season. But I want to talk about Chris Kinnear, because what a guy.
What a guy.
What he's done for football in Kent as well, and Dover, very loyal manager. And one of the things, obviously, with the podcast, we want to talk about quite a lot the tactical side of it. And I guess it's probably not unfair to say that Chris Kinnear's style of football may not have been the most aesthetically pleasing on the eye, but it got results, and it was entertaining. But I think the biggest thing is that how did you, obviously when you were at Spurs, it was, I guessing it was all sort of, you play nice football and stuff like that, and then you drop down to your Torquays and Dover, and you've just got to win. You've got to do anything you can to win. How was that for you? Did you feel that was probably a good part of your development to learn that side of the game?
I think, first of all, I have nothing but the highest praise for Chris Kinnear. I think, even outside of him being a coach, he's a very, very good man. So is Jake LaBelle. They were, after those years where I had, like I was saying to you before, you're building up this front all the time, and you're always having to be a certain character. And then I felt like I had these two dads who just kind of said, just do this job and be yourself, and that's what we want you for. And for me, I hold them so highly, and I say all the time to them, if they ever decide to go to a team or go any higher a level, that I would call them straight away and say, like, I'm willing to come back because I loved playing under them. In saying that, yes, the tactic is a bit what's the best choice of words? Regimented. He has one way, and they want to stick to that one way. But for me, I was kind of fortunate that, because also we had, like, some of the players on that team were so talented. We had Manny Parry, who was such a good defender.
Yeah.
We had Femi, Mitch Pinnock, who I talk to all the time. I just messaged him yesterday. Ryan Burke, Connor Essam, like, such a talented team. But for me, I was really fortunate because they would kind of make me man mark, kind of counter the best player on the opposite team. But most of the time, that would actually allow me to get further forward. So I ended up kind of being able to touch the ball in midfield, get my run sometimes here, my run sometimes there, and just constantly work on my 1v1 defending, because this guy's trying to suck me out of my position, but he doesn't realize that Chris doesn't mind me doing that.
Yeah.
So I would just follow this guy everywhere.
I remember you. It's funny you should say that, because I remember watching one game down at Crabble, and I don't know if you ever played with Sam Magri. I think it was probably a season after that you came, and he was a right back, and he was literally on left wing, where he'd just been sucked over to man mark the guy, and I mean, he man marked him out of the game, in all fairness, but you watch it and you think, wow, you just think liquid football type. Do you know what I mean? And, but in all fairness to Chris, you can't argue with his stats and what he's done what he did for Margate and Dover. He's a fantastic man as well. And I actually, when I was noting down the stuff for the podcast, I actually picked up on Mitch Pinnock, and Chris Kinnear definitely gets the best out of players and develops. And you think when Mitch Pinnock came to the club, he was, he hardly played a game in 2-3 divisions below, and then he's left and he's gone to play for Wimbledon in the third tier. And I think, as you just see with all the players that comes in, he develops them, and then they leave, and then they go on to usually better things, And I don't know if you sort of picked up from when you walked into the club that this guy's going to make me better.
I just I sat down and we had a meeting at the training ground, and he just wanted to talk about, like, me as a person, not as a footballer. And I know that sounds so strange, but it was kind of the first time in my whole career to that point that somebody was just talking about me as a guy. He wasn't saying, hey, I like that you're 6'2", you run real fast and you can kick a ball real hard. He was just saying, like, I spoke to this guy and he said, you're a good person. And I walked out of the meeting like, man, the guy's like my best friend. I don't know what just happened. I called my agent. I was like, yeah, get it done. This is the team. And I'm so grateful, because that was really one of the best years.
Yeah, and I think as well that when you have that connection with someone, you're going to run through fire for them, aren't you? As opposed to, if you say, you go into a club, you can do this for the next couple of months. You won't be near the first team, or you're not really my plans, but in a couple of months' time. So I guess that, and as I say again, Chris did that with so many players as well. So, you're obviously going to maybe not give more effort, but you want to give that extra little bit. You're flailing in a game towards the end, but you're going to run through walls for him.
Yeah, no, him and Jake were incredible people, and I really hold them really highly.
Yeah, so if you could just sum up your time in English non-league football, what would you say is the thing you learned most from your 2 years with Torquay and Dover?
Just knocked my AirPod out. That's a good start. What if I have to sum up the experience, man? I'd just say, especially the second year, and that's no disrespect to Torquay, but it got my confidence back. It really, really made me love football again, which is funny because we're talking about a style of football that's not actually that good. But it made me love it. I grew so close with my team. It just made me enjoy winning again and enjoy, like I was fortunate that year that we happened to win. I happened to score a couple goals and everything went so well. And I emerged out of that Dover year really, really wanting to loving football and wanting to give football a good crack again. Whereas when I had come to Torquay at the beginning, I was pretty broken, and it sounds so strange to say because I've been so graced with some of the teams that I had signed for. And I am so grateful for that. But unfortunately, when you're not playing, that's the thing you love doing, playing, winning. And I had just been starved of that. So for me, the conference was my lifeline, and it revitalized everything for me, and especially that second year, and especially Chris and Jake.
Yeah. So then after that, so sort of coming towards the end of the season with Dover, was you sort of sure in the fact that you wanted to maybe go and test yourself at an even higher level, and you felt that year at Dover you could go on to do that?
So I sat down with Chris in a pub with a pint, which is the most English thing ever. And I said to him, Chris, if I don't get anything from a team higher, there's no place in the world I'm going. My girlfriend loves it here. I love everybody here. I want to be here. And he said, okay. I said, I give you my word. And we had negotiated the terms, and I was pretty happy with everything. And I said, can you just give me the month? And then right at the end, which I hated because I kind of pulled the wool from under them, but I got 2 offers, and one was in Italy and one was in a Middle Eastern country. And I just said to him, listen, I'm sorry, but monetarily, you can't match either of them. I have to do what's best for my family and my future, but just want you to know that if in some divine miracle you could afford to do that, I wouldn't go. And if we had been promoted, I wouldn't have gone. And Chris understood that, and he understood that I was like an ambitious kind of person. And then I faced the 2 things, and I went for the Serie C deal, and I went to Rieti.
Yeah.
And then
you've got a bit of an interesting story from Rieti, haven't you?
Yeah.
So you're going there, and I think it's probably a logical step. I'm not too familiar with the third flight of Italian football, but I'm guessing it was a better standard than what you was playing at Dover.
Well, I kind of just did the simple math of 5th to 3rd. I was like, okay, you're jumping 2 divisions in 2 countries, crazy for football, and on paper it seemed immediately more televised. My market value was going to improve, and I was going to be viewed by a lot more clubs. And obviously, I'm from Italy, so everybody in my family was so happy. And I signed a 2-year deal, and the deal, which now, once again, in hindsight, so easy to spot all the problems I should have foreseen. But the deal came from an agent I had never worked with. It came out of the blue. Problem number 1. And problem number 2 was it was a lot of perks that rather than monetary things. So the money I was happy with, and it improved over the course of the 2 years, but it was very perk related. We will pay for your car, we'll pay for this apartment, we'll make sure that this flight happens, this flight for your partner, this and that and all this. You can go to this restaurant, you can eat, you can get your groceries from me. And I'm thinking, okay, well, the way that's set up for me, that money is just going to go straight into my savings account. this is actually going to be a lot more money than I'm even thinking. Like, I'm thinking this is a fantastic deal. And then I remember getting there on the first day, and all of a sudden paperwork started changing. They stopped giving me my contracts in English. It would be in Italian, and I can't read Italian. I could speak it because my family's Italian, but I never went to school or anything. So I would ask them, like, what's this mean? And what's that mean? And they would say, oh, no, don't worry, just sign it. I'm like, oh, yeah, I'm not going to do that. Like, just, can you translate it for me? And I go, oh, and they would get frustrated when I wouldn't sign things and stuff like that. And then I got to my watch, which they had promised me was like a house. And I got to like a studio apartment in a bad area in the city. And I was like, oh, okay. It was like kind of that moment, where you book that like all-inclusive special holiday. And then you get there and the pool doesn't work and the food's this and the room's. That was kind of my feel, and I was starting to see that they had manipulated so many things in my contract. And then over the course of that month, it was always next week. The car didn't turn up. They told me that they were going to give me a sedan. It was going to be there to pick me up from the airport, and I was going to get the keys. 3 months had gone by. I still hadn't got my car. Then on the 4th month, I got a Toyota Aygo. Now, I know that's an annoying thing. I know that's a random thing, but
Yeah.
if you had just thought you paid for a Mercedes and then I gave you a Toyota Aygo, you'd be very, very confused. And the apartment it was always the house is not ready, or it's renovation, it's this, and then we get to my first pay, and half the money is missing. I go into the office and I say, guys, half my money's missing. Oh, sorry, like, Gigi, I'm sorry, man. It's just an issue. Don't worry, it's gonna come. Okay. So I'm the vice captain this time. So, like, I'm trying not to show these problems in the change room. I'm trying to motivate everyone for the season, and we start getting to the games. We start doing well, and, next month, no money. Go back into the change room, go back into the chairman's office. What are you doing? Now it's a month and a half. Oh, I'm sorry. It's because of the television with the broadcasting. It's next month. Okay. We get to the next month, half a pay. So now 3 months I've received one wage. And these things just kept going and going and going. And it was just getting worse and worse and worse. And then there was one specific moment at the end where I'm in my apartment with my partner, and like, I'm kind of at wit's end, and the grocery store that they said I was going to get groceries from said they haven't paid the tab. The restaurant we would eat at said, you guys aren't allowed to eat in here anymore, and all these things were starting to pile up. And I think we're in December, and it's like 7, 8 o'clock at night, and I get like a real heavy knock on my door, and I can see from the front door that there's like 3 people, and they're big looking people. Right now, I'm by myself with my girlfriend in a city that I don't know anyone. Now, I fancy myself, okay, maybe against one person. 3 people, I don't really have these odds are kind of against me. So I'm thinking, oh, crap. This apartment's not in a very good area anyway. So in Italian, I say, who is it? And he says, it's your landlord. Open the door. Okay. So I open the door. He says, Giancarlo? And I say, yes. He says, do you know why I'm here? No. Because you owe me the last 3 months' rent. And I go, oh, my friend, I'm so sorry. Listen, this is just a miscommunication. And I'm trying to, like, deflate the situation. I say, I'm sorry, brother. And I apologize for my Italian. I know I'm a bit bad, but, basically, the club pays for my rent. That's part of my contract. And he goes, no. We spoke to the club. They said you pay the rent. So we want the money tonight. And I'm, essing my pants right now. And I think that things are about to escalate very, very heavily. So I'm facing these people. I've got my girlfriend behind me thinking, what the heck have we just signed up for? I've received 1 month's wage at that point. And I just said, listen, be here tomorrow morning and I will drive you to the chairman's office myself and we will get you your money. So fortunately, they kind of calmed down. I managed to sort of show them my contract on email that said that they had to pay. And they came the next morning. We drove to the chairman's office and I said, you have to pay them. And he started saying, oh, well, technically the apartment's in your name. So really, if I don't want to pay, then you... And I said, okay. Called my girlfriend and said, pack the stuff. And I said, I'm not playing for you anymore. I'm packing my stuff. He said, don't be stupid, blah, blah, blah. I booked a flight home and I left. And I had zero plan, but I was just so angry. And I hadn't received my money. And, to my face after all that, the chairman was still willing to kind of try to put the blame on me. And I'm thinking to myself, my name's Giancarlo Gallifuoco. I lived my whole life thinking that this was my home. I'm the vice captain. It was the first time they'd ever been in Serie C. I scored the goal that won them their first game in their history. I'm thinking I'm the guy that's in the change room fighting for you, saying, no, the wage will come next month. No, it's just the... And then I'm feeling after all this, I'm the fool that's been listening to you. So I just packed up my bags. I went to the Rome and the Fiumicino, the airport, gave the keys to another player, my car, got in the thing, turned my phone off and just flew to Australia and said, whatever happens. I don't want to be there anymore. And
I bet that was an absolute shock to the system after obviously the trust that you had with Chris Kinnear at Dover, and then completely flip it on its head and no one has your back there in Italy. Oh, it must have been a nightmare.
And the worst thing was that when it was happening, and once again, not just saying this because there's a Dover fan online, but my first thing to me and my girlfriend were talking, we said, well, let's just go back to England. Let's go back to Dover. Let's just go back there. I was happy there. We were happy there. Let's just take that deal back. But in that half of the season, Dover was doing quite poorly. Yeah. And it was rumored that he was going to get sacked. And so then that all started playing a massive factor. So I'm not negotiating now with Chris Kinnear. I'm negotiating with the chairman who doesn't want Chris Kinnear here at that time. So then that kind of I started thinking, well, I'm going to be going back to Dover, and it's not going to be my Dover that I think of. It's not going to be that team anymore. Half those players are gone. Birdie's at Maidenhead. Connor Essam's not there. Pinnock is at Wimbledon. This dream that I had, Chris Kinnear, Jake LaBelle, they're not going to be there. This isn't going to be the Dover that I wanted and that I remembered. And I was in Australia, and then by some football god divine miracle, a player in the A-League gets injured and I get offered a contract by an A-League club, and then everything took a turn.
You joined Western Sydney Wanderers straight away, wasn't it? It was a couple of weeks after you touched down in Australia. Marcus Babbel brought you to the club, is that right?
Yeah, so Marcus Babbel took me in. Basically, their centre midfielder done his ACL. And I just happened to be in the right place at the right time. The assistant coach used to coach me when I was 14. So he knew me. And he just said, how fit are you? Called me one day and I said, pretty fit. And he was like, okay, you have to come in and pass basically a yo-yo test. And if you can pass the yo-yo test, we have a contract for you for the rest of the season. Went in there, ran my ass off, and then fortunately got to play those last couple of games for Western Sydney. And then, everything kind of went uphill from there.
Yeah, so you go to Western Sydney, and it's for people that maybe haven't watched you and watch you play. You're sort of a hybrid between a centre back, a holding midfielder that can occasionally play on the right side of the defence. So I think you've told me this before, but your ideal position is a 6, isn't it?
Yeah.
that's where you see yourself. And when you went to Western Sydney, you was offered. You said, the centre midfielder's injured. That's where we're going to play you. So was that a big part of it as well? Because obviously at Dover for the first half, you were sort of playing centre back, and you was playing centre back as well at Torquay. Is that right? So
Yeah, so
obviously,
Torquay was centre back, right back. Yeah,
so a big was that sort of a big incentive to go there and play in a position that you want to, in a role that you think suits you best?
yeah, and with Chris, I would say all the time that if I stayed the second year, that I wanted to play centre mid, and that was like one of my biggest things, because I think that every footballer wants the ball more. Simple, and I just wanted the ball more. Yeah, I think I tell myself that the harder you work, the luckier you get, and sometimes when I look back at the chronological order of my career, I feel like the times when things were going wrong and I was working really hard, I happened to get one of these lucky kind of turns, and that was a massive moment for me. I came back, and this guy just happens to get injured. Great player, good player, and he just gets injured playing centre mid, and then I got to play centre mid in a good team with good players, and I kind of had all the pressure off me because I wasn't their player. I was an injury replacement. So I just kind of came in and just played however I wanted to play. And then fortunately, the time that I got there, we kind of went on a bit of a winning streak. So the attention that it gathered, I became a part of that because I was the new addition, and it was awesome. And like you said, a massive thing was being able to be in the midfield and being able to shoot, run, dictate play. And yeah, man, it all went uphill from there, to be honest. Yeah, I was pretty happy.
Yeah, and I think so. Obviously, you go to Western Sydney as the injury replacement. You're back home in Sydney. It sort of must have all fallen together. And I think they are saying that you make your own luck. And I think, with that move from the outside, it probably looked like it all sort of fell in place nicely for you when you went back to Australia.
Yeah, it's weird how it does that, huh? And then you go on these podcasts and they think I've had the world's hardest life. But yeah, well, from the outside, it kind of fell so perfectly, man. And just to add, the extra cherry on top, that literally the week that I signed for Western Sydney Wanderers, my lawyer had beaten Rieti and I got all my money back. So it kind of was just a win-win, man. I was pretty happy.
Yeah, so you come in. So the injury replacement contract, that was to the end of the season. Is that right? Yeah. And
Yeah.
So you come to the end of that, and then you went to Central Coast Mariners. Yeah. So what was the sort of, you're at Western Sydney, you're liking it, obviously. Was it the fact that they didn't renew your contract, or, Central Coast Mariners come in, a big club in their own right in Australia, and you think that's the next step?
I think I'm and I'm sure you guys can tell by the pattern of the career, but I think I'm a bit cursed sometimes about putting sometimes value on the monetary aspect of things and setting up my future, and then the ambition side of things. When Western Sydney offered me a contract at the end of the season, the money wasn't great, and it was for 1 year. And Central Coast had offered me a 2-year with a 1-year extension at the end, and the money was almost double. So I saw this opportunity from what had just happened to now getting one of the biggest contracts of my career. And I just thought, you know what, I'm going to go to Central Coast. I have security, I can actually set up a base, which is so ironic now from where I'm standing. I can set up a base, I can be the heart of the team, and hopefully I can change the fortunes, because Central Coast used to be a powerhouse, and then in the last 5-6 years, it's not had the greatest run. and it's kind of known as a club that can only really afford 3 or 4 expensive players by A-League standard, and then it can't really fill a whole squad like the Melbourne Victories or the Sydney FCs or the Melbourne Cities. And so I signed there. I chose that because I thought the security was the smarter option. And then because I have the brain that I have, 6 months in, an opportunity comes to go to the most successful club in the country, and they have to agree a little term and fee and terminate my deal, and then I jumped at it. So I literally, I'm saying to you a reason that I then was a hypocrite for. So I don't know why I have this brain, but Central Coast for Western Sydney was to have a simple long contract, and then 6 months into that I tore that up. So I don't know what I'm
I
doing.
think as well though that definitely from the outside, if you're looking into Australian football, you think Melbourne Victory, I think it's probably the biggest club in Australia. I would say.
Yeah,
Near enough everyone in my family that has a liking of football that's in Geelong, they Melbourne Victory,
right.
So from that point of view, I think it was an easy decision to go there. It's the
Yeah,
biggest club in Australia. You're an ambitious guy. It's sort of, you have to sort of make the sacrifices, tearing up your contract with Mariners to, put you on the stall of the biggest club in Australia.
yeah, exactly. And I think another thing for me also was that the last time I was here, I didn't feel like I was able to get going, So
Did you feel like you
the
had something
person
to
who
prove as well? Going back
yeah,
to
yeah, exactly. And the person who actually called me in early January was my old captain, who is now like become the general kind of manager, sort of technical director of Melbourne Victory. And he just said to me, he was always really really good to me when I was here, and always thought that I deserved to play more. And he just said, like, I said to you when you were 21 that the opportunity would come. Now we need a player like you. I think it's your time to, and it was a good bloody speech, man. And I just got off the phone, called my missus, said, start packing because I'm going to make this happen. And bar from Corona happening, man, I was pretty fortunate. I came in, I played every single game. And we were doing all right. So it sucks that this had this 3-month sabbatical smack bang in the middle of it. But definitely love the choice, and I've loved being here.
it's
It must
not.
have been quite a nice change for you as well, like especially given the sort of ups and downs you've had after leaving England again. It must have been a nice sort of, and then you had obviously these 3 months aren't ideal, but having sort of the time to sort of consolidate and sort of work on it, and then be able to get yourself in the best possible condition for the restart must be must be ideal considering everything after Italy.
Yeah, man, it was, and to be honest, it was a bit of a blessing in disguise because in the preseason, I had done a pretty serious like tear. I was playing a preseason game for Central Coast, and basically there's like 3 adductor muscles, and they connect to your pelvis, and then there's a couple abdomen muscles and your hip flexor, and I just tore all of them. Like I just
Ouch.
went for straight bingo. And when I was coming back, and I completely understand because Central Coast is a business, and I was a more expensive investment. They wanted me ready for the first game, and I'm the kind of person that, like we were talking about Chris Kinnear, if he said jump, I said how high, and I wanted to win all the time. So when Central Coast kind of needed me to play, I was doing whatever and kind of taking whatever so that I wouldn't feel too much pain and I would play. And by the time I had gone to Melbourne, you're like 14, 15 games in, and I hadn't really fixed my problem. So, before games, it would be a lot of painkillers and a lot of tablets to kind of just make sure that you can get through this game at like 70, 80%. And then on the Sunday, you're kind of just like stuck in a coma, and you feel woeful. But then, as horrible, like I was just saying, coronavirus has been horrible. But for me personally, I spent 3 months rehabbing, strengthening, and getting over this injury. And now, we're going back to training. We just played a kind of in-house friendly game, and that's the first game I've played in about 9 months without a painkiller. So in that respect, I'm very, very, very grateful for that.
Obviously, would you say you're settled now at Victory? In the respects that, you've been there sort of a few months. I know you haven't played the last 3 months, but you've been with the club. And is that sort of somewhere that you base yourself for the next few years? I know football's a bit of a fragile game at times, but is that sort of somewhere you want to base yourself for the future?
Right now, yes. I think the conversations that we're having are heading in that direction, and I'm very, very happy. I like a lot of my teammates I've played with before, and I feel real comfortable here, and I love this city as if it was
Lovely
home.
city.
And yeah, no, I definitely would like that, but as you both now know, I have said that before, so I don't want to jinx myself. But yeah, in an ideal world, I'd like to stay for another 2-3 years.
Yeah, nice. And you've got obviously, Victory. I guess they would have the aspiration to get back up the league and sort of targeting Champions League, Asian Champions League. I guess that's a big factor, isn't it? As well, it's a big progression.
Yeah, it's massive. It's massive, and it's been horrible this COVID, because it kind of stopped us from having a half decent start. We won the first game, but yeah, it's definitely the aspiration. It's also kind of a big moneymaker for A-League clubs. So it definitely, even from a financial standpoint, it really, really helps fund you at a specific standard if you can continue to make the ACL. So yeah, we definitely want to push for that next season.
I think as well. I'm not going to stand here and say I'm an Asian football expert or anything like that, but how would you say that the A-League's teams compare to, say, teams in China? The Chinese teams have got big money, but they've obviously got the foreign player cap. So what I'm sort of trying to say is that they might have the 2 or 3 world beaters in their team, but then the rest of the team sort of, maybe substandard. And I'm guessing that your A-League teams, you might not have as big talents, but your sort of depth overall is probably at a good level.
I think Australians have a very good the general Australian player has a very good attitude. Like, I think almost across the board, they're all quite athletic, quite positive, and I think that sets for quite a high average. But in saying that, I fancy any A-League team against most Asian countries, but then when it comes to Chinese, Japanese, and the Korean, they are a very, very, very high standard, and especially the Chinese, with the money that they have and the foreigners that they can afford, you can be as athletic as you want, but Hulk will rip your new one and then slap it in the top corner, and there's not really much you can do. So in that respect, it's hard, because no matter what, it's very, very hard to kind of try to play against a team that has that kind of money. But for the most part, I think Australia has definitely got to be in the top 3 strongest average across the ACL.
Yeah, and I just want to sort of move on to Aussie football in general. I think the big news is that the Women's World Cup has been decided that it's going to go to Australia. So just how big do you think that will be for football in Australia as a whole?
I think Australia, I think it's going to be massive. And I think it's really good for Australians, because I think like Americans, because Australians have so many sports that they follow and that they like and that are ingrained in the culture. You have a kind of, I guess it's human nature, but you kind of sway to your team that's going to be winning. Whereas in England, because there's no disrespect to the other sports, but predominantly one sport. If you're from Scunthorpe, you go for Scunthorpe, and if they win, lose, draw, rain, hail, or shine, you still have to go for Scunthorpe because you're from Scunthorpe. But in Australia, if you're going for Sydney FC and then Sydney FC has a bad year, you can start going for the Sydney Swans in AFL because they're doing better. And I think in the last couple of years, because the Socceroos weren't booming like they were before in the 2006 World Cup and stuff like that. Not that they have been doing bad, but just not to the same caliber. And the A-League, has been starting to get a bit dominated by basically Sydney FC and Victory. I think certain fans around the country have started to dabble in other sports. And I think with the Matildas and the Women's World Cup, the Matildas have been sensational this whole time. And I think with winning this bid and it coming to home soil and us experiencing our country doing well in football again, I think that's really, really going to motivate people to have that itch again and start watching football again. Well, I guess I hope so, but I think it's going to be massive for us.
And I think as well, you picked up that it's the most participated sport in Australia. So there's obviously something that is sort of going wrong in the bridge between playing sport and then supporting and watching it. So, potentially, and I think as well that you guys down there are quite screwed when it comes to the World Cup as well with the time zones and stuff like that. So I think, I don't think it would be too long before you have a World Cup that in sort of your region that would sort of work with your time zone. So I think, that would be a big thing for you guys as well, because from the outside, people might assume that it's not a footballing country, but when the World Cup comes around and the Socceroos are in it, everyone
Exactly.
everyone goes for it. And some of the players idolise. Tim Cahill is an idol as well. So so I think I'm not going to sort of ask you like you've got all the answers, but would you feel that maybe the Women's World Cup coming back would sort of be able to bridge that gap somewhat?
Yeah, I think for sure. And I think another big thing is that and I don't know if you know, but so our next season, for the first time in like 10 years or something, the A-League season is now going to be played over the winter, our winter.
Yes. Yeah.
So we'll line up with Asia. And I actually think that's better because it also lines up with the grassroots, which before you had the A-League playing when the youth wasn't playing, and then the youth playing when the A-League wasn't playing. Whereas I want my kid to play for his local team and want to be like the player he's going to see that night and support in the stadium, rather than it being like one part of the year it's him and then the other part of the year he watches that, but he also watches NRL and he plays AFL and da 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 da. So I think that this shift in the calendar is going to really, really help. I think it's going to bring grassroots closer to the A-League clubs. And I hope that can allow us with promotions and stuff like that the players can go to these kind of teams and clubs and help training sessions and stuff. And that will bring the culture closer together. And then I think that will also, that us shifting with the Asian market will bring that market closer together, which I think is important for us, especially when it comes to the broadcasting. And then I think with the World Cup coming to the soil, I think all those three things have the potential to really, really get everything out of the game in Australia.
I think it's a bit of a perfect storm that of all those coming together at once, isn't it? Because, as you said, it's sort of everything will align. The World Cup will inspire the next generation, and then they'll be able to play and watch, and it just sort of gives not more clear pathway, but it sort of it's more inspirational than, as you said, having two different seasons and being sort of that sort of disconnect. It just makes sense for it to sort of be one sort of cohesive season.
Exactly, and like, even with even the Sunday league, you play on Sunday with your friends and you're screaming out the names and the goals of the night before. That's what you do. It's lined up perfectly. you hit a free kick and you say, oh, Trent Arnold or David Beckham, or da, 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 because it's from the game last night. It's aligned perfectly with each other. It's constantly motivating you through what you do every day. And Australia kind of lost that because we were so inspired by European football, we tried to mimic your calendar year, and it just didn't make sense. And then we had football getting played in 40-degree heat, and that doesn't make sense. And that just really wasn't clicking. So I think, like you said, it's the recipe for the perfect storm. And I really, really hope that it can get a lot of Australians on board.
Lovely. I think just really conscious of the time as well. I think we'll probably wrap it up there because I'm sure you're a busy man. And no, but honestly, mate, thank you so much for talking to us. You've had such an interesting career already, and I'm sure there's a few more chapters to write.
Such an amazing insight on everything.
Thank you guys, man. Whatever else I can do, if ever you need any like sort of promotion or anything, I'm happy to help. You guys were awesome, so I hope this is massive, and you're the next Joe Rogans, and you sign $100 million deals, man.
Thanks, mate, and I'm sure it'd be great
much.
to have you on when you've written another couple of chapters in your career. But
Cheers,
thanks again, mate. I really appreciate it.
Cheers.